Simplicity is in everything. Simplify the experience. The key to success, aircraft, aluminum, steel. But I didn't come up with that idea. That's stupid. What's up, guys? Today I want to talk to you about one of the greatest entrepreneurs of the 20th and the 21st centuries, Steve Jobs. Once I read a book about him. Here it is. It's by Walter Isaacson. I read it in English before it was translated, and I read it 3 times all in all. And I want to say that this is probably the greatest book about business that I ever had in my hands. And I've read probably around 300 business books in total. And despite the fact that Steve worked in IT at a technological company, the book reveals some of his universal business principles that can be applied to any area of business. And today I want to share them with you. So make sure you watch this video till the end, write in the comment section, ask questions, and share this video with your friends. The first rule that Steve learned, probably from the very childhood, was strive for perfection in everything, even in the small things. Steve's father was a jack of all trades, a true craftsman. He used to tell Steve that a true master of his craft will never settle for anything less than excellence. For instance, if a carpenter builds a quality dresser, he will never put some third-rate plywood at the back. Even though the dresser is up against the wall and nobody's gonna see it, the master still knows about it. And that's the principle that Steve followed throughout his whole life and career at Apple. There was even a case when the chips that went into the system unit that nobody got to see, they were perfect. And inside some of Apple computer models, those chips even had the employees' signatures. That was sort of a bonus, I guess, to encourage the team. So they would feel great to have taken part in creating this computer. But I guess perfectionism as a feature, whether it's Steve Jobs' perfectionism or in general, is an inborn quality. Because I know from my own experience that I can, for example, wake up at 3 in the morning knowing that I missed a comma in a text for my cashback service, secret discounter. Or something that I remember from my childhood. I remember I was drawing something, some sort of animal I was copying from a book. I did the drawing perfectly, and then you start to color the frame with a marker, and you go 1 millimeter past the frame, and the drawing went to trash right after that. I first noticed this striving for perfection in myself when I was 6, and so that's why I think that this is an inborn quality. Of course, I might be mistaken, and maybe this strive for perfection or perfectionism can be trained. Going to expositions, for instance, imparting a taste for beauty, but from what I've known and seen so far, it's an inborn quality. And so the first rule is strive for perfection in everything, including the small things. You will feel great that you created a perfect product and your consumer too. Or take Cristiano Ronaldo, for instance. Look at how he executes every penalty shot, how he takes a certain number of steps back. Why? Well, because he just can't afford to play not at the highest level. That's also striving for perfectionism, and that's why Cristiano has been the greatest soccer player in the world for a long time. There are born talents like Messi, and there are trained talents, one of the greatest examples being Cristiano. The second rule of Steve Jobs and Apple is simplicity is in everything. That's our motto, whether it's company management, product design, or advertising. The consumer naturally needs a thing that is user-friendly because we're living in a hard time with information overload. And our brains just refuse to think. We're getting lazy. Lazy to use complicated products that aren't user-friendly and are hard to manage. We're too lazy to read information on overloaded websites. And so therefore, the key to success that Apple used, and well, basically we all use sometimes, and I recommend you all do it, is to create the simplest and the most intuitive product which is easy to use. And in the same vein, if we talk about interfaces, for example, of websites or apps, the UI of your website or application should definitely be as clear and as simple as possible. Look at the most successful mobile apps out there right now. They basically just have 3 buttons at its best, like buy, skip, and watch. And also, any single function on your website or app should be easy to access in just a few clicks. In other words, simplify the experience for the user, or they will leave and they will go to your rival's website or store. For instance, what is the point of CAPTCHA on a website? Unless it's to protect from automatic bot registration, it serves to reduce the number of your customers. The client couldn't crack a character in a CAPTCHA. Congratulations, he will go to your competitor. He is not going to sit there for 20 minutes solving that CAPTCHA on your website. And so the principle that Apple used and we should all use is simplicity is the key to everything. Reduce the number of interactions inside of your products or websites and make your interfaces as simple as possible. As an illustration of that, Apple even used this principle in their offline stores. In the official Apple stores, whether it's New York or Russia, all the procedures from choosing a product to the final purchase are kept to the minimum, so that the customers don't have to bother themselves with anything and are easily guided towards the simple procedure of choosing, trying, and buying. So we're moving on to the third rule of Apple. Product should not have much more functions that the consumer actually needs. Back in the day, Steve was a CEO and then a co-owner of the Pixar company that produced feature animations. I'm sure all of you know the company by its popular titles like Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, and so on. But not everybody knows that besides producing animation, Pixar also developed top-notch software for animators who produced animation. But that software was super complex and very expensive, and because of that, Pixar lost the competition in the animation software market to Apple. And so basically, that's how Steve Jobs came up with one of his rules, one of his business principles, that a product should not contain much more functions that the consumer actually needs. The next principle that Steve Jobs and Apple were guided by, a product should be sold as a complete package. That is, if we take an example of a computer, the consumer does not need a separate screen unit, and so on. I mean, provide them with everything right out of the box, including a system unit, a monitor, a mouse, a keyboard, and a modem back in those days. Now it's always built in. In other words, don't make your consumer go to 10 other stores in the city, or if we're talking websites, have some reasonable minimum of services on your website. But make it the only website. Do not make users leave your website in search of some other service or function which you don't have. One more rule that Steve was following, never put a raw product on the market. It's better to be a few weeks late with the release than to screw up and release an imperfect product that is not going to have a wow effect at launch. And more than that, will later disappoint the customers in the future. And that also stemmed from Steve's desire for perfectionism. But here we should add that excessive perfectionism might also be harmful, because look at how it often happens with quite a lot of services and products out there. For example, if you've seen Craigslist website, and this is the second most visited website in the US, it's a regular classified ad website, and it has such a poor design you can't look at it without crying. I mean, it's much more pleasant to hold a regular newspaper than scroll through this website. But nevertheless, it's the second most visited site in the States, and that's the mistake that many people often make, is that no matter what we do, whether it's creating a website for a local business or an app for a startup or a business, or learning a foreign language, we pursue perfection so bad, and because of that, we tend to polish the product for 2 years instead of bringing it to some reasonable, acceptable level. Of course, it may not be perfect yet, but it's already pleasing to the eye, it's functional, and you better put it right there on the market. I mean, don't wait there for another 2 years until you bring everything to complete perfection. So, of course, not to release a raw product on the market is a prerequisite, yes, but there is no point in getting hung up on polishing it to the ideal. Everything requires a reasonable measure, a logical limit. You get it to an acceptable level, put it on the market, your customers start coming and bringing revenue, and only then, in a stable environment, you finish the design or functionality of your startup. So the next rule of Apple sounds like this: never compromise the quality of the product for profit. So what is meant by that is don't cut corners, especially if we're talking little things that form the perception of the product. Apple once decided to save some money and they released one of the models of their iPhone 5 in a plastic case. They were called iPhone 5C. But by that time, of course, everyone had already been familiar with Apple's high-quality materials: aircraft aluminum steel, stainless steel with polished glass, and so on. So no one wanted those phones. And also, Apple's products have become a kind of an attribute of success life and a ticket to the world of the rich and famous, which is why they're so popular in the world. I mean, there are other smartphones that can compete, let's say some Android-based phones, but Apple gives a chance for anyone to feel a little bit more successful, that is, a little richer and happier because of that. And that's why you can't sacrifice the quality of the product for a profit. Like the plastic case of the phone reduced its price by, say, $50. And for iPhone buyers, it was not a significant sum of money. And therefore, it was quite predictable that due to saving on quality materials, iPhone 5C sales failed. Steve also said that you should never outsource the production of those things that will determine the perception of your product and your company. And that's exactly why Apple always controlled even the production of packaging for its phones. And so now when you open a box with a brand new iPhone or a MacBook like I have here, you immediately understand from the very first seconds by the feelings that you have when you touch it that this is really an expensive product. This is an Apple product, and it will not disappoint you in the future. Steve could not just give some third-party company the right to develop packaging, so everything was done by Apple, because that's what defines initial and general perception of the product. It's the packaging. Therefore, I also think it's right that you need to keep those things under control, the things that affect the perception of the product by your customers. Also, that one resonates with the next business principle of Apple, which can be summarized as keep all the key elements of the system under control. It comes from the case when in 1999 Apple had a conflict with Adobe when they were developing some software for Apple. And so at some point Apple quits working with Adobe, which caused certain difficulties. For example, many websites at that time were coded using Flash technology, some of the most beautiful websites. But because of the conflict between the companies, Apple did not support Flash. And that's when Jobs realized that it was crucial to keep the development of both hardware and software under control of his company. And of course, all of that led to both the software and hardware working in perfect sync, because they were developed under control of one company and by the same engineers. Most importantly, because they were able to tweak something along the way and run a bunch of tests. And as Steve used to say, the true simplicity and quality come from two technologies linked together, the hardware and the software. And so if, for instance, you are developing or producing some kind of consumer product, try to do everything by yourself. Of course, it doesn't mean that it's your employees who are supposed to build microchips or sew stuffed toys or cut cardboard for packaging. I'm not talking about that, but the design and the development should be executed by your company. And of course, you can outsource that later for production to China or some other countries, but keep it under your control, of course. In other words, your business should never depend on one supplier or like a key client. Because if there is some disagreement, for example, you can't negotiate the price for your product or services, your business might simply collapse. Therefore, never get tied down to one key partner or supplier. Of course, it's easier now to use some ready-to-go solutions from third-party companies, like not developing your own mailer app, for example, to send emails, because there is always a ready-made solution out there, and you can embed it to your website, for example, via an API, but the key functions of your product are better be developed by yourself inside your own company. Because, as an old Japanese saying goes, you gotta have everything of your own to be a free man, not a slave. The next rule is, the execution of an idea is as important as the idea itself. There is a lot of great ideas out there. I can basically give out like 100 ideas to anyone for free, but in business, it's the execution that matters. Because the same idea in different hands can take off and turn into a unicorn company and get to 1 billion or 10 billion valuation, or it can just die off. And you shouldn't be scared of your idea getting stolen, because we're living in a time where everyone steals everything. Apple itself has stolen a lot of things, so if you look at the big picture, they basically haven't invented anything new. All that is a compilation of things and technologies that already existed. I mean, how was the iPod player invented? When they were trying to come up with a music player, Jobs loved music a lot. They were visiting a Japanese factory, and when they saw small Toshiba hard drives that could be used as a storage. Well, I saw those hard drives about 5 years before Steve, but I didn't come up with an idea that you could create a great music player back then, putting the hard drive inside it, but Steve did. So being scared to use someone else's ideas is pointless. I mean, stealing something and making a full copy is wrong, but everything in the world has already been created, so use some ready-to-go solutions and make them better. As Jobs himself said about it, if someone created something valuable, it should be found and used. But of course, we should remember that execution is the most important thing in any business, because as I have already said, any idea can sink or swim in different hands. The next rule sounds like this: you should always run to where the puck is going to be, not where it has been. Jobs was once very inspired by the example of an outstanding hockey player, Wayne Gretzky. And that's when he came up with that rule: skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it has been. Because it's predicting the route of the puck, of where it's going to be in like 5 seconds, helped Wayne Gretzky to become one of the greatest hockey players and a multiple Stanley Cup winner, which is the top award in hockey world. And so going back to Steve Jobs and business, if we think about this in terms of modern business reality, then it basically means that we should be able to predict trends and develop the products of tomorrow. Simply because no one needs outdated technologies or outdated products. If we draw a parallel with my business, which is cashback services, if our client wants to get a cashback at an offline store, they just pull out a phone from their pocket and they show a barcode inside the app. I mean, lots of people tell me to make a plastic card like it's nice, it's convenient, etc. And you can do a co-branding with a store, but I mean, what's the point? It's so obsolete. I have around 100 discount cards at home, but when I go to a restaurant or a store, for instance, I never have the right card on me. It's either in the car or I left it at home, but the phone is what everyone always has with them. You pull out your phone, show the barcode from the screen, and the staff person scans it with their phone, and that's it. You're getting your cash back. In the same vein, my competitors and some clients ask me like, why don't you guys use QR codes? Like there's a lot of cashback apps that have a system where you can scan a QR code from a receipt, send it to the app, and then wait for your money to be added. But I mean, I think it's very complicated. Our system is that a client pulls out a phone, shows a barcode to the cashier, and you're done. You don't have to wait for a receipt after the purchase. I never wait for it anyway. Or scan it or send it somewhere. I think it's just a bad call. Also, what I get asked a lot is why we use barcodes in our app but not QR codes that seem trendy. And the explanation is simple. Both QR codes and barcodes are scanned with a phone pretty easily. But barcodes can also be scanned by cashiers at offline stores, and sooner or later, we're going to be present in all retail store networks. So it's the barcode that seems like a prospective technology for us, the technology of tomorrow. So I guess, of course, Steve was right about the goal for his company to predict trends and skate to where the puck is going to be, not to where it has been. In other words, create technologies of the future and for the future, not the outdated and obsolete ones. And that brings us to the next rule, which is don't rely too much on market research. I came across a very interesting phrase in the book about Steve Jobs. Let me read it for you. I guess it was Henry Ford who once said that if I'd have asked the customers what they want, they would say a faster horse. The thing is that people don't really know what they want until you show it to them. That's why it's Apple's job, as Steve said, to guess what the customer wants before they even know it. Read what's not even on the page yet. But at the same time, Steve noticed, and he referred to it in many of his interviews and in his book, that the customer is not always right. There was a great example of that when the computers were released. The consumers didn't want to use a mouse. But we all know that a mouse is a necessary device, and it came into use a long time ago, so we basically couldn't imagine working on a home computer, not a laptop because it has a touchpad, without it. So that's why the client is not always right. And if Picasso would have asked the people that admired him what genre he should be painting, he would never have invented Cubism. Because it was not the exposition visitors that invented Cubism, and it was not regular consumers that invented Amazon. So if you really want to come up with something revolutionary and valuable, don't ask the consumers what you should do. Although that does not mean that you shouldn't take the customer's opinions into consideration. You should study customers' behavior, not ask your customers before developing your product. But while developing your product, you should consider your customers' needs so that you can guess your client's desires and feelings. And what's very important on later stages is that you constantly monitor the analytics and statistics of usage of your product, so that you can get some insights on how to make the interaction with your product or a website even better. So you study your website visitors' behavior to convert them into a real buyer. So this is where studying and analyzing your client's behavior is crucial. So instead of listening to your clients at an initial stage of development, you should just guess their desires and needs. But on the second stage, when your product is finished and already in use, you should definitely study customers' behavior and adapt, tweak your product if necessary to make user experience smoother. Because that will make it comfortable for your customer to interact with your product, it will save them some time and bring them pleasure of using your product. And as a result, the user will stay with you and bring you more money. By the way, Jobs called that empathy. That is, an ability to understand consumer desires and feelings better than other competitors. It's Apple that has been famous for knowing its clients' wants and needs. And Steve himself had a highly developed sense of empathy. He was really good at understanding any opponent, and that's why he was a good manipulator and could adjust to anyone. So the next rule is empathy. We should understand consumers' desires and feelings better than any other company. So the next rule sounds like this: who stops getting born starts dying. And what it says is that we should always keep the pace and stay up to date and not stall, updating your product line with time, updating your website, etc. And it's even more preferable that you should even be a few steps ahead of time, so that your competitors stay behind you. In that case, you will never have to adapt to the market. So the rule is, who stops getting born starts dying. I think we should remember it because constant updating is crucial in business. Making a current product even better, expanding your product line, and launching new products on the market that resonate with the present time. As a tradition, I will give away this book to the author of the best comment. It's not in English, it's in Russian. I'm going to give away a copy with my signature. It's from ozon.ru, an excellent online store, by the way. We often buy something there, not sponsored by them. And also, I think we're going to have several prizes. I want to give away something else for 3 more comments that I find the most interesting. It would be great to get some questions from you regarding this topic, so the authors of 3 more comments will have a platinum, that is the top account for our cashback service, Secret Discounter, that allows you to shop at any online and offline stores and save to the max. So 3 platinum accounts, and we're gonna have 4 winners in total. It's great that we have such a nice and educated audience here on the channel. I don't see any haters, and it's great to see your smart questions. They're interesting to read and answer. I hope Steve Jobs and I weren't too overwhelming for you. We'll take a break for a week and I'll see you in the next video.